Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new Fireside chat with your fantastic hosts, Abby Matthews, my apologies, Hank Gardner, and myself. I love Fireside chats, and we haven't done one in a while, so I'm going to give you the quick rundown on what goes on here, and it's pretty straightforward. It is just a casual conversation between us pals about something to do with writing. And
Yeah.
today's conversation is about our best advice for new writers, because we do a lot of content that kind of builds on each other, and I feel like we have this natural progression if you
Yeah.
go back and watch all these live streams that we do and all these videos we put out. But like, there are new writers every single day, so why not have a cool conversation and get them off on the right foot by talking about our best advice? And before we get into the nitty gritty about it, Abby, Hank, how are we doing today?
If I were any better, I would be on vacation.
Oh, okay, I'll take that. Yeah,
It
yeah.
was
Yeah.
didn't it didn't hit quite as much as hard as I wanted to, but
But it worked.
But it worked.
Relatable. Yeah.
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 Abby,
Believe
what
it or
about you?
not, I was excited today was Monday. I'm ready to kill it this week. I think we should
Excellent.
all be ready to kill it this week.
I get that way too, Abby. Like Sunday night, um people talk about the Sunday night blues, like, oh, the weekend's over, I have to go back to work tomorrow. I get kind of pumped up a little bit on
I
Sunday
get
evenings, like
jazzed.
thinking, especially if I pull up my Dabble calendar, where we keep
Mhm.
all of our events and stuff, and I start getting in the mindset of, okay, I've got something to do tomorrow, and I've got Wednesday. Okay, it puts me in a good mood.
It's for me, it's not a I have to do this thing. It's
I
an I
get
get
to.
to do this.
Right,
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
I like that. I
It's
So
all
like
about
that.
mindset.
Yeah. Well, hello to Hope and Julia and B in the chat. If you've joined us, feel free to say hello in the chat, or if you're watching after, drop a hi in the comments, which is a great way to remind myself to say, hit that like button to help the algorithm get us out there to more people. Subscribe if you aren't subscribed. Leave a comment down below about your best piece of advice for new writers. The way that we're going to run this one is I tasked my fellow hosts here to come up with their number one piece of advice for just new writers in general. And Abby says hers is a bit of a hot take, so I'm excited for that one.
Ooh,
But then I
I
also
love a
made it
hot take.
I also made it harder by saying pick a particular topic about writing or publishing, and bring us your number one tip for that particular area. And I figure we start off with our number one tips. We'll each say ours, and then we'll chat about them before the next person says theirs. But yes, please, in the chat, drop your number one tip for new writers. Tatiana, hello, and David, hello. Who wants to go first? I'll do
I
it.
don't know. I was
You
gonna
talk me
say,
into
I don't know that I want to lead with the hot take.
it.
That's setting the stage that I
All
don't
right.
know.
All right,
It
I'll
is
do it then.
Monday.
So, this, despite giving you both the homework to do this, it was really hard for me to come up with my number one piece of advice, because I'm like, oh, it could be this, it could be that. I want to say this. I want to say, can I say a tip that has like 5 tips in it? But then that felt like cheating, so I didn't do it. But then I got inspired by W Campus. And if you head on over to W Campus, somebody, Abby, put a quote from me at the very top. And it's along the lines of, it takes a village to make an author. And the more I kind of dwelt on that, the more I realized, yeah, that probably is my number one tip, because we have this idea that writing is such a solitary endeavor. And I always poke fun and say that when you picture an author, you picture someone locked away in their study, typing furiously on their typewriter until the perfect novel is done in like a stack of papers, and then they send it off to the publisher, and yeah, or they chuck it in the, or a picture in Love Actually, the guy that goes to, is it
Yeah, at the
Spain or
lake.
Italy? Yeah, he
Yeah.
gets a villa where he writes his novel. If only, right? I'm stuck with my
If
kitchen
only.
table in my desk here. Um, but so we have this idea that it's just you, but that's just not the truth, right? When you write, you draw on like your own experiences, your education, your lived experiences, the place you grew up, your family, your friends, all of that. You draw on the books that you've read, the authors that you admire, where you are now, who you know now, your communities, including writing communities like W Campus. your editors, beta readers, critique partners, and writing groups, whichever ones you bring in to provide feedback on that, your agent, if you have one, your publisher, if you have one. And then once your book is out there, your readers also provide feedback in the form of reviews. And though a lot of people say, you know, don't read all your reviews, reviews are a great source of information about what's working and what's not working within the stuff that you write. And, you know, maybe don't listen to the extremes, right? All those 5-star ones, they're ego feeders. They make you feel good, but they aren't providing constructive criticism. All the 1-star ones are generally just angry people. So your 2 to 4 stars, that's your gold, right?
Yep.
And so
never read your 1 or never believe your 1 stars or 5 stars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the more you can lean into and learn from your village, the better an author you're going to be, right? And don't think that you are above adding more people into your circle, into your village, and don't feel like you can't find a place that you belong, because it might just be that you're feeling anxiety about joining one of those places or putting yourself out there, but they are there. And I've mentioned Dabble U Campus for like the 3rd or 4th time now, but that's a great place to start if you haven't. So Hank, Abby, my spiel, my what's the word I'm looking for? My platform for this being the best writing tip is out there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, here you go. We all have the, you know, idea that we're solitary creatures, but I mean, all writers, if nothing else, we have, like you said, you know, we have editors, you have your book formatters, you have all the people that you have on your team that help you put this book out into the world. You know, I think about how sometimes screenwriters or the people that write for television shows, they sort of get it right, where you have this writer's room where everybody comes in together and you're able to be collaborative and workshop something, and that makes your writing stronger, because you are bouncing these ideas off of others. I mean, there's only so many ideas you can come up with, but when you add another person to the mix, sometimes you can become more prolific. And like I just said, stronger. The writing becomes stronger. And so I think when you mistakenly think this is a very isolating endeavor, you're shorting yourself with how great your work could be if you let someone else in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. I just to co-sign everything that both of you just said. Some interesting things that I've learned about that during my time writing is that I started podcasting because I wanted to pick other writers' brains, and I wanted to surround myself with people that were successful, and I wanted to learn as much as I could. And other than like very specific craft things that I've learned from other people, which, you know, you have to, it's just a matter of working at the craft to learn what makes a great sentence, what, you know, how to structure a plot, you know, all the mechanical things that you have to learn. What I've learned the most from other people is that learning from other people has validated my own creative process in a way that seeing how other people do it, and how that they all start with a blank page. There's always stories begin from a kernel of inspiration and grow. It works the same way with every writer, that at one moment the book doesn't exist, and then it does, you know, through some spark of whatever, and then the writer has to chase that thing down, and then, you know, there's a process of you know, forming the world and all of that, and through picking other writers' brains and seeing their process, it taught me that I did understand story, and that I could tell a story, and mine may look different than Abby's and look different from Doug's, but it gave me the confidence to express myself, and that's something that you can only get from other writers, and comparing process and bouncing those ideas and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, well, we all agree that's the number one piece of writing advice. Thanks for coming. We'll see you.
See you
But
next
before we go on to one of you two fine folks, I want to highlight some of the stuff coming in the chat here. David saying, believe in yourself and trust your writing community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Julia saying, learn your process. And I really want people to focus on that first word, because you think you might know your process before you've even written your first book, but you'll learn from your first book and your second and your third and your fourth and your fifth and so many, that your process is constantly changing and tweaking and adapting. So it is definitely a learning process. And B is saying, no doubt, no matter what, believe because you can, start and don't stop believing. And David, know your genre, throwing in a second tip there, which is absolutely an important one. Even if you aren't writing for commercial reasons, knowing your genre is very important.
I feel like David's been listening to me. I feel like that's like the thing I've been saying on repeat lately.
Tatiana saying, just keep writing no matter what. Even if it's a bad writing day, just keep going. You'll get there. We say no 0 days here. Right? Even one word is a win, is a success. Even revising one sentence is a success, right? Just keep the momentum going, right? Comes right in there. And then B also saying, I question the idea we write alone, maybe physically, but are we alone? Or is it just me because my characters are here with me, telling me what they want to say? So you don't feel alone in this. I love that.
Have I ever told you guys about when the pandemic hit? And, you know, everybody's kind of starting to like isolate. And so you were calling all your friends, you're making sure everybody was okay. So one night we were eating dinner and I turned to my husband, I was like, oh my God, I forgot to call John Thorpe and just check and make sure that they're okay. And Sean looked at me, he's like, that's a character from your book, Abby. That's not a real person. And I was like, oh, I am so confused.
I can relate, totally Abby. Real. I can relate. I'm not going to specify how, but I'll just say I can relate.
Okay. You've been there, so.
See, if I mistakenly think that my characters are real, then we have issues. There's danger out there, Will Robinson. We need to.
Yeah.
And Tatiana saying here, I've always wondered, does it count if you write notes down for your book in reference to no 0 days?
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Resounding yes.
Yeah. Look, we look for anything that we can tick that box. Yes. Yes. Yeah. If it's helping your story in any way, yes. Yeah. And there are days where no 0 days might actually mean trimming words. And maybe that's a bit of a hot take, but sometimes the best thing you can do for your novel is to cut a paragraph.
Yeah. Because revising and editing is still forward progress towards your best story. Yes. The only time I would say that, you know, writing notes down might not count is you have to be self-aware enough to know if you are researching for the sake of procrastination versus researching for actually writing your best book. But that's only something you can tell.
Yeah.
All right. Who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Hank.
I can go. This is a bit of ephemeral, kind of heady advice, if you will. But when I began writing, I got under the impression that I had I was under a time crunch. Like I had to make this happen, and I had to, you know, I had a certain amount of time to accomplish this. And this is what the industry is doing. This is what's going on in traditional publishing. This is what's going on in indie publishing. And there are certain waves that are cresting, and I have to get in there and I have to hit it at just the right time, or my chances are all over, you know. And this was, you know, the better part of 15 years ago, and the indie revolution was just sparking off, and the Kindle gold rush was happening, and there were so many people out there, all these voices out there, you know, get your, you know, write, publish. And I feel like a bunch of people just got kind of washed up in the rush to do something that they didn't bother to say, is this the best thing I could write? Is this the book of my soul? If you want to, you know, get all high and mighty about it, you know. But you know, in the subsequent time, I've learned that books are an interesting thing, that because marketing will come and go, markets will come and go, trends will come and go, and books have a way of washing up over and over again. I mean, you and I were talking about this the other day, Matt, Abby, about how The Great Gatsby, gets referenced over and over again, and that's 100-year-old book almost, and these things keep resurfacing, and trends come and go, publishing opportunities come and go, but if it's meaningful to you, then it's okay to take your time and to make sure it's the best that it can be. So what if you miss this opportunity? There'll be other opportunities. Things change all the time. Markets change. The way you bring something to market changes. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And writing this one book is probably not going to make or break you. And of course, there are stories of people that their house was in foreclosure, and they published this book and they got a deal, and it saved everything. I've heard a couple of those stories, but it's a couple. It's this one book is probably not going to make or break you. It's probably not, but take your time. It's going to be okay. I think that's like a big piece of advice. If I could go back and tell myself, is that take your time. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with this idea, this growing idea that I think people are starting to see through more and more, that you have to monetize all of your hobbies. Every waking second of your life has to be used for productivity, right? Like you don't need to write to market if you don't want to. You don't need to rush things just to hit a quota or hit a wave, especially your first book. Well,
you really struck a nerve there with me, Doug. My dad grew up on a farm, raised by parents who came out of the Great Depression. And so it was a hard scrabble life that they led. And then my dad, we built a house on the property that he was raised on. It was a big farm. But he was, every morning he would get up and go to work, and he would look over at the house he grew up in. And it was this thing in him that he was going to break the cycle and do something, bigger and better than his parents did or whatever. And you could never have a hobby around my dad because you had to monetize everything. Everything was about getting out of this cycle that our family had been in, for generations. And you could never have a hobby because if you had a conversation with my dad about it, it would be, oh, well, you could monetize this if you, and which is great in a sense, but sometimes you need something to just be yours, and it doesn't have to accomplish anything but satisfy you on the inside. And so yeah, that really struck a nerve with me when you said that.
Addie, anything to add?
No, but I felt that same pressure when I was writing my first book. Maybe not to run towards the monetization piece of it, but I felt like I had made a decision to do something, and I wanted to do it. And it felt like a race to the end. Like I wasn't going to be the person that gave up partway through, that walked away, and that I didn't want to spend 10 years doing it. Like I wanted to do it. I wanted to start it. And maybe because I have a little bit of my mom in me, like I don't like to leave an unfinished project. And so I felt this totally self-induced pressure to finish what I had started. And the truth is, writing a novel isn't something that, especially the first time you do it, necessarily happens super quickly. I think the more practiced you get, the more you understand the process, the more you understand the craft of storytelling and how to do it effectively. You get faster and faster and faster as you go. But I totally felt that pressure myself. And I wish that somebody had told me to slow down and take a breath and enjoy it, because it was very I wanted to do it, and I wanted to get it right, because let's face it, how many of us out there right now, we were all probably the straight A kids at school that wanted the gold star. Were you not, Doug? Were you one of the
I didn't come here to be
outliers?
seen, Abby. I didn't come here to be called out. So
But I did. I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it right. And that's another added pressure that I think we put a lot of added pressures on ourselves that we don't need to have in order to get the book done. So, yeah.
And Hank, I know you highlighted Jacob's comment here about why do so many people think writing has to build a career. And I want to comment on it, but it ties directly into my second tip. So 100% valid.
Why don't we just put a star next
Yeah, we're just going to star it.
There we go. Okay. You can come back to that.
All right.
All right.
Abby,
are you ready for the hot take?
I'm ready to argue.
All right. So I don't think any of us are going to disagree when I say that this is a really difficult thing that we've all decided to do, right? Jacob, I will give you a star right now. Okay, let's get on there. This is a really difficult thing that we've all decided to do, and everybody jumps into it, and we come at it in a different way. Maybe you love to outline, and you jump in, and you start outlining, and you're having a great time, and it's, if you're like my friend Jeff, it's really hard to get you out of the outlining process because you just love outlining, and so you stay there for forever. Maybe you're a pantser, and you have this really wild idea that comes to you, and so you jump in, and you're like, let's do it, let's go, let's write. Wherever it is that you start, at some point in the process, it's just going to get hard. You're going to hit a stumbling block, right? And that's when I say, walk away. And by walk away, I do not mean put it down for a few minutes, go take an actual literal walk away from it for a week or two, let it marinate and come back. No, I mean legit walk away. Like, why are you choosing to do this thing that is hard, that takes up so much mental space, that takes up all of your free time and your energy, and you're obviously like agonizing over it? Why would you choose to make this the thing that you do if you hit a point and you're like, this is hard, I can't do this? And I say, walk away. Because here's the thing. If you can't walk away, the only way out is through. And so that becomes your motivation to solve your problem, to circle around and start back, to fix the really hard problems that maybe you want to ignore. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people ignore feedback, or they say that person doesn't understand me, or they don't understand their story, or they just don't get it, because whatever it is they're telling you is going to involve a lot of work to go back and fix and make right. And we're a little afraid of it. When the work gets hard, walk away. And if you can't, then you got to fix it. And that, my friends, is my hot take.
That's pretty good. And Hank, before I launch into a spiel, please.
I bristled a little bit when you first started talking, and then the longer you talked, I was like, yeah, I mean, I get it. I get
it. I think Abby phrased it in a way to intentionally bristle us.
You mean antagonistic Abby?
To elicit an emotional response?
Yes.
Like a true writer?
Yes, bravo. Last week, when we did our premium workshop on imposter syndrome, this is actually something that I brought up, is that there are a million things you can be doing with your time that you enjoy. Right. There are a million ways to have fun. There are a billion ways to make more money than writing your first book, especially if it takes you. It took me 5 years to go from idea to debut with my first book. I was in school, right? I was writing on and off. I fell out of it for a while. I reworked it. I learned about indie publishing. I published it. Then I learned more about indie publishing after. Right? I should have done that beforehand. But it takes a long time. And it's, like you said, a lot of work. And so if you find yourself absolutely dreading the process, like, I'm not talking about just a hard, but like if you are dreading it, if it makes your stomach churn to think about sit down and write, if you find yourself making excuse after excuse after excuse, and suddenly your story just isn't fun anymore, or you can't think of a new story idea, like, it's okay to not write, because you only want to write if you really, really like storytelling. All right. If that, and even if storytelling is the thing that you like, there are other ways to do it too, other than writing a book. So if you don't enjoy this, then like, go do something you enjoy. Now, if you still have that kind of turnaround, if you have that, oh, I really want to do this, if you can't let it go, then go to Dabble and read up some articles to make the process easier, to remove some of that friction in the system. Like, learn how to motivate yourself, learn how to write a book, because it might just be that you didn't have the tools in your toolbox before. Right?
Yeah.
And this goes a little bit to something I talked to Jenny Nash about last Friday, Abby.
You know why I'm laughing?
Tell me.
Because who did I steal that advice from in the first place?
Of course. Well, after or from talking to so many writers over so many years, I've noticed a pattern that happens with a lot of writers, is that people will write a book and then try to sell that book. Now, whether that means sell it to a publisher or try to sell it on the market as an indie, published book, whatever. And either they don't place it with a publisher, or it doesn't perform well on the indie market. Some people will take that book down and revise it and submit it again and try to, land an agent or, find an audience on the indie market, whatever it is. And sometimes they still don't succeed, and they'll take the book down and they'll revise it again. And they'll go through this process over and over and over and over until the book either comes to the form where it is successful, or the market has changed so that it now has, there's a market for this book. But whatever, people will stick with this one book, or the other people will write a book, try to sell it. It doesn't sell. They throw that book away. They go write a completely new book, and they start the process over again. And maybe they grow as a writer in the writing the second book, or maybe they just, are writing toward a market that is, more, ready for what they're writing, whatever some people will stick with one book. Some people will just write a completely different one.
The others.
If you're not having a good time writing your book, maybe you're writing the wrong book. Like not to negate anything that you said, Abby, maybe you're just writing the wrong thing. Maybe because you like to read John Grisham legal thrillers, you think you can only write John Grisham legal thrillers, when you really ought to be writing space pirates.
But that's the whole walk away piece.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Walk away, and if you keep coming back to the keyboard and you keep trying again, I mean, then you've got you have to figure this out. Yeah. Because you're not going to be able to let it go.
Right.
Yep. Yep. All righty. Well, some great tips for all writers. Now we're going to move into some specific sections.
That was a moderately warm tip, I have to say.
I think the delivery was hot. But then when we dissected it,
it was solid.
Yeah, it was good.
I knew I could get a reaction.
Yeah. What's the flaming dessert that they bring out? And
like a brulee?
Maybe
like the chocolate lava thing?
No, that thing that's literally on fire when they bring it. Is it like Bananas Foster?
Maybe.
Sort of flambe.
Who knows?
Flambe,
something. It's flaming, but when you put the fire out, it's delicious. That's kind of like your take there.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah, that was terrible metaphors, but you get the point.
We got there.
You get the point.
Let's take a look at the chat here. B is saying, when things are getting hard, you can make a comparison list when you find something hard, why or why not. Julia saying, figure out why you don't love the project or your current process. Absolutely. And I don't think Abby's tip is, well, I know Abby's tip isn't, oh, I'm struggling with motivation today, I'm never going to touch this book again. Right? That's
Yeah.
not the tip,
Yeah.
of course. Sarah's here. Hello.
But do any of you guys is anybody sitting here, and I feel like you guys will all totally get this because my husband and I sort of fall into this camp. Like, we wish we were the kind of people that could like finish work and eat dinner and turn on the TV and just like be done with the day. And
Never.
neither one of us is like that. We're like, now on to the next project. Now we're going to do this thing. Now what are we going to learn? Now what are we going to talk about?
Doug's totally that guy.
Well, because
You?
I do all my productive stuff. Like these days, I'm waking up like before 6, and so I'm out for my walk at 6, and then I'm being productive. I make dinner. Then it's like 7 o'clock, and I'm like, I've been working all day.
I do all those things, and I still can't turn my brain off. And I'm like, what is next? What project do we have now? So.
Dawn and I will be watching something on Netflix, and we'll pause it and talk about how we would finish it, and just never finish
it. What else is going on in the chat here? Julia says, "Oh yes, write the next book advice that I should follow more." Erica saying, "Rewrote my first chapter for the 3rd time, and suddenly my story has life again. It was hard getting there, though." That's fantastic. Yeah. I'm glad. Reed telling us that the term is flambe that we're looking for.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Thank you.
Okay. And Hope, I realized I wasn't starting in the right place. I liked what I wrote. It was hard to let go, but so worth it. Fantastic. Okay. Let's dive into our more specific tips then. And mine, I chose indie publishing. Shouldn't be a surprise. I love talking about indie publishing. So I thought there were like a million different tips that I could pick, or like tips that could span a bunch of things at once. But ultimately I went with define your goals. And I think we all know that I'm a big goals guy. I like setting goals, and I really like when a properly set goal can actually help you achieve it rather than just be something you're aiming for. But specifically for people considering indie publishing, like determine what success means to you. Because when we think about indie authors, there is a huge umbrella from people who just want to write their one and only book, get it published, make a few sales, but say, I have my book, it's awesome, gift it to friends and family, look at it on the shelves, be proud, and they should be proud. And then you have the other side where you have people writing 12 books a year, making 6 figures off of it, right? And it is unfair and unwise for someone who is over here aiming for that one and only book to compare themselves to somebody over here. And it's also unfair for somebody who writes 1 book a year to try to compare themselves to someone who has the cadence and discipline and system to write 12 books a year. So my advice to indie authors is to define your goals, figure out what success means to you. What are you trying to achieve this year, in the next 2 years, in the next 6 months? Really boil down on that, figure out what you need to do, and then along the way, just enjoy the process. And this relates to what Jacob said. We started, we gave him the gold star. Why do so many people think writing has to build a career? It doesn't. And I know he knows that. But this is the common saying. When a lot of people tell people, oh, I'm writing a book, when's it going to be published? When are you going to be a bestseller? When am I going to see it on shelves? Potentially never. Right? And nobody expects someone who goes golfing or skiing to try and go pro, or playing video games or watching Netflix. No one expects someone who enjoys hiking to make a hiking YouTube channel and make millions of dollars off of it. So if this is you, if you don't want to build a career off of writing, make sure you stick to that goal. And that may change over time, but focus on that so you don't get down on yourself when you aren't achieving somebody else's goal.
Brandon Sanderson told me one time when I was interviewing him that if I remember the legend correctly, it was his 13th book that he had written that finally sold, and he said, if I wouldn't have sold that book, then my kids, when I passed away, my kids would have inherited a house with manuscripts just stuffed in every closet. He said, because I was going to write. And if someone chose to buy it and publish it, that's amazing, but I was going to write.
Mhm.
And he said, I have friends who go to the YMCA like one night a week and play basketball, and no one comes to them and says, hey, when are you going to join the Lakers? You know, people are allowed to do things just because they enjoy it. But as soon as you write a manuscript, people start asking you, when are you going to publish it? And he's like, sometimes you write just because you're a writer, and the 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 action of writing is different from the action of publishing, and for whatever reason we have merged those two and we force them to be one and the same, and they not necessarily are.
Yeah.
Well, it's an end result that I think people can identify with. And
I
so
think you're
when they
right.
don't understand anything else about writing a book, they do know what it means to go to Barnes and Noble and buy a book. And so
Right.
they immediately go there. And I think that's just kind of what we're fighting against sometimes, when you talk to people that don't write. And comparing yourself to others can be so dangerous, even if you're comparing yourself to someone who has the same goal as you. Sometimes that's just as slippery a slope as comparing yourself to someone with a completely different goal. So like, I have this girlfriend, her name is Suzanne Kearns, and I'm totally naming names for this story. Suzanne is freaking hilarious. We're friends with this other writer whose name is KJ Dell'Antonia. And of course, KJ and I started writing books at the same time with Jenny Nash, right? KJ already had an agent for nonfiction. She was already swimming in those waters. But she had the same goal as Suzanne and I, which is to get a book published, pick up an agent for fiction, publish a book. Well, KJ immediately picked up an agent. Immediately, her book went to auction. It was on the Oprah list. She's a New York Times bestseller. She did all the things. And Suzanne turned to me one day and she goes, I know a rising tide floats all boats, but do you feel like sometimes some people get yachts and here we are stuck in the dinghy? And I'm like, yeah, Suzanne, I do feel like that.
I'm writing that down, by the way. I'm writing that down. That's fantastic. Maybe it's a testament to the fact that writing storytelling it feels achievable. Because I think as a species, we're a storytelling people. It goes back to the earliest history of humankind. Is we sat around the fire and we told stories. It's what we do, and there's something inside us that maybe we can see. There's a handful of people that can make it to the NBA and play basketball. And if you're 7 feet tall, your chances get better. Here I am at 5'6" over here, and I can write books, and I don't have to be 7 feet tall. But it's like ingrained in all of us to be storytellers. Some of us do it better than others. Some of us have better ideas than others. But I think people can see that happening, and maybe that's one reason people do that is because we could see someone writing a book and publishing it. It seems attainable, in some weird way.
Well, it's more attainable than ever, too.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, back to my tip, if publishing is your goal, then when you define that goal, figure out what you need to do to get there, right? Plot your course, understand what you need to learn, what people you need to bring in and create that village for you. If publishing is not your goal, you still have a goal, still figure out what you need to get there, right? Still what you need to learn, what people you need to bring in to help you, what tools you need, that kind of stuff. But Hank, I think you're absolutely right. It's that we're all natural storytellers. It's in our DNA.
Right.
And so that's why I think, like, it always kills me when I hear people say, oh, I'd love to write a book, but I couldn't. I guess you can. Yes, you absolutely can. It's hard work, though. To Abby's tip, it is hard work. And so that's what separates, the writers from the people who want to write, I guess.
It is hard work, but it's not unattainable.
No, absolutely not.
And anything
because
worth having
it's hard, makes it, yeah,
Yeah.
that much sweeter.
Yeah.
There's we'll stop beating this dead horse in just a second, but there's a great documentary. I think it's called It Might Be Loud, or It Might Be Loud. I think anyway, it's about three guitarists. It's The Edge from U2, Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, and Jack White. And the three of them, they're completely different guys, but they come together and they talk about guitars. So I'm a musician, so this fascinated me. But it opens with Jack White out on a porch, and he's got a 2x4 and a nail and some wire, and he's making a guitar of sorts. It's like a one string, and he's got a slide that he plays on it, and he's got a electric pickup that he puts in it, and he makes music out of this thing. And he talks about that for anything worth doing is worth struggling through. And he said it goes back to the Garden of Eden when God told Adam and Eve that they had to toil with the ground, that they had to work at it. I mean, he said, I think that's this thing ingrained in us that we want to strive, we want to work to dig something out. And I think it's more satisfying when you have to do something hard. It was like, JFK talking about us going to the moon. We do this because it's hard, because it's something we want to accomplish.
Yeah. There's so much. Back to the
totally philosophical on that. You're welcome.
Well, back to the concept that everything needs to be monetized.
Yeah.
Like, view it as it has to be income driving. We can't just be proud of this ridiculously difficult thing that we've done.
Right.
Even I fall victim to that, where like I finished the first draft of the next novel in my series in January, and immediately I'm like on to the next. Right. I have to just like consciously take some time a couple weeks later to be like, Doug, slow down and celebrate what you did, because it's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, Hank, you're up for your tip.
Okay. My next tip is that and I find a lot of creative people, writers especially, fall into this this pantser versus plotter. And for whatever reason, we have convinced ourselves that to be truly creative, you need to fly by the seat of your pants. That planning something out squashes all the creativity, and that is the biggest pile of bunk. That I still like to leave room for magic to happen, for me to come up with grand ideas in the spur of the moment, or as things unfold. But one of the best pieces of the biggest accomplishments in my writing life was learning to plan, to have a plan, to have a roadmap, if you will, and to stick to that, and then find ways to leave room in that for creativity to still happen. But have a plan so that you don't get 50,000 words into something and it just meanders, into nowhere. You can still be creative and be organized, have a plan, know where you're going. And that's mine.
What was it that Doug said on Friday? Nobody's going to take away your pantser card.
Yeah.
Stop and think about it before you write.
Yes.
Well, and to reference Jenny Nash for like the 7th time today, I think immediately after that, she said something along the lines of, it's not that planning requires zero creativity. You need creativity and imagination in the planning process.
Which leads into what I'm going to tell you guys about it. I mean, have you ever seen the sketches that artists do before they take on a big painting?
You mean like the ones where they do like a circle and like a line through it and then boom, it's a face?
Sometimes, yes. But do you know sometimes the sketches end up just as beautiful, if not more so, than the actual final products? But if you think about it, if you're going to have a canvas that's 8 feet, 12 feet, whatever, even a small canvas, and you're working with expensive materials, you're not going to jump in and waste a bunch of materials. I mean, to Hank's point about you don't want to write something 50,000 words and it take you a year to do and you've gone nowhere with it.
Right.
You know, so I mean, artists have always done it and they work creatively on those sketches. They figure out what their ideas are before jumping into the final product.
Or you could get 50, 80,000 words into it, it go nowhere and qualify for an MFA.
That's right. That's right.
So one of the reasons that I left writing Twitter like a handful of years ago, before it was cool to leave Twitter, I left it as a hipster.
You were like,
is because there's such this like tribalism in the online writing community about X and Y and, you know, plotting versus pantsing. You have to write this way, or this way of writing is better than that way, which is just so wrong.
I have a hot take that will dovetail with mine. Okay. And the hot take is people always recommend Stephen King's On Writing to new writers. And that might be one of the worst pieces of advice, because Stephen King famously has a whole passage in there where he tells people to be pantsers, and that if you have a plan, you're going to kill all the creativity in your book. And that is the biggest load of bunk. And I think that's where so many people get that idea, and then it takes them years to work that bad advice out of their head.
Hey, here's my hot
Stephen
take.
King.
My hot take is Stephen King has freaking earned that pantser card by writing 7 million books, so that now he can jump in with no plan and write himself to an ending, because he understands the rhythm of storytelling. He naturally does it on his own. So he can sit there and say that and sound like an expert because he's earned it. And here we are, not having earned it yet, trying to follow in his footsteps and can't.
And even though there's a meme that Stephen King's endings are lackluster because he's a pantser, to the point that when they remade it a few years ago, I think it's the second, they broke it into two pieces. I think part two, Stephen King has a cameo where he's playing a little shopkeeper. And he makes a joke. Someone brings a book to the counter and he says, the ending stinks or something. Like, I can't write an ending for it. And he's like making a joke about himself. And
at least he's self-aware.
Exactly.
At least he's self-aware.
But it is kind of a meme. And I think it's kind of a meme because of the way he writes. And he, you know, at least he goes with it, like you said.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a while since we dragged Stephen King through the mud on one of our shows, because he
been a while,
still won't come and join us.
Yeah.
But a couple of things I want to point out here. First is that I think King is very self-aware about this kind of stuff too, and he's intentionally inflammatory in on writing sometimes. Where, like, I pulled his little section about adverbs and how adverbs are the worst thing you can include, and he, of course, has like 3 adverbs in that paragraph.
Right.
But for the plotting versus pantsing thing, I don't like that whole idea of there's one way to do something best, right? This whole prescriptive view of writing, to the point where even when we did our 60-day novel challenge last year, we gave you the template, we gave you steps, but what you did with those steps and what you did with that template and how you outlined or didn't outline your book was entirely up to you, right? Like you said, Hank, you have the map, you have the mile markers along the way, but what you do in between, where you go off course, entirely up to you. What I will say is that I think earlier writers should skew more towards plotting, or at least educating themselves more before they start writing. I think there's a lot to be said about developing your writing as you write and exploring your story, and I'm 100% all for that. But I am also a big fan of the saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And so figure out what you don't know. And sometimes that means establishing those markers along your map just by understanding the key story beats. And then if you venture off that track, if you say, this is my midpoint, and you start writing, and then suddenly you're like 50 miles off from your midpoint when you finally get there. That's cool, right? But at least you understood the structure. At least you understood the theory behind the craft. And then eventually, as we said way at the beginning of this, let me see if I can find it again. No, I'll find it. Okay. Learn your process, Julia. Learn your process. When you start writing, if you're a new writer, you are neither plotter nor pantser. You have no idea what you are. So just be okay with that, and you'll figure it out. Right?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
Abby,
I
before we
think
go
my
to you,
process has changed every time I write a book.
every single time.
Same every time.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
My process
wanna
is what it is.
Let's
Check
don't
in
be
on the
prescriptive.
chat here. Let's see.
I do what I want. Don't tell me what to do. I feel like that's how I spend my whole life, just saying to people, I'm not gonna tie my shoes anymore. Don't you tell me what to do. All right.
Keo has joined us and says,
Hello,
my way
Keo.
is, as long as it helps you finish your book, then do what works for you.
Mhm.
And I'm a hardcore plantser, which, like, real talk, 99% of people are.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yes.
Right?
The spectrum.
Reed's
It's
asking
so
MFA.
funny. Speaking of that, like the most hardcore planner that I know of, Josh Hayes,
Mhm.
writes the most detailed outlines, but and he'll talk about the why outlining and planning is the best, and then he'll be halfway through the novel and he'll completely rewrite his outline because the story changed.
Mhm.
So he's just a hardcore documenter of it, but he's like everybody else. He has a plan and it's going there, but things shift and change, but he just documents the whole process.
Yeah. Reed asked MFA. It's a Master of Fine Arts.
Yeah, it's
which-
kind of an inside joke where we kind of dig at MFA.
So if you have an MFA, you should be very proud of it. Let's be real.
Yeah, let's be real.
But if you have an MFA, it does not mean you have a book.
Yeah, it rarely means you have a book. It does mean you have $300,000 in debt, though.
And a ton of really great connections. So.
Right.
David says, this is why I like doing scene challenges, and practice makes perfect. And something else I'm pulling from our imposter syndrome workshop that I actually got from a dog trainer is that I don't like practice makes perfect. I'm not picking on you, David, but practice makes progress, because we are always improving and learning. And quite frankly, I don't know if any of us can be a perfect writer. If Stephen King still botches the ending sometimes, I don't know if any of us can reach perfection. So okay.
All right. You ready for my, because we only got a couple minutes? Or?
Yes. Sarah has an MFA.
MFA in a book, no connections or money. You have it all.
Sorry, Sarah. All right, Abby.
This gloves as I sit here for this next hot take.
There's mine is not actually. I don't know that it's a hot take so much as I figured
all that
something
build up for nothing.
Really important out on Friday. So I'm going to preface this by saying, Hank, you've heard some of this already, but I had a meeting with an agent on Friday that was one of those things where, like, you can buy a one-on-one, like if you go to a conference, or if you sometimes attend workshops and things online, you can do the add-on package where you get the one-on-one with the agent so that you can talk to them very specifically about your query or your first couple pages, or whatever it is that they're willing to then give you the feedback on. And the part that really stinks is that you have to pay to get actual genuine feedback. But the great part about it is you're usually face to face and you get it, and it's hopefully worth the money. And what I had on Friday was worth the money. And I figured something really important out, because I feel like I'm really glad that B is here, because I feel like I owe B an apology. So here's what I have to say to all of us, new writer, old writer, whatever, is that you got to take advice with a grain of salt, even when it's coming from an expert. Because I had just attended another workshop by a different agent about query letters and what goes in them and what kind of personalization do you want, and all of these things, right? So I wrote everything down, and I was taking it as law because it came out of the mouth of an agent. And then this agent that I had the one-on-one with said almost exactly the opposite of what the first agent said. And I think these agents are just people, and no two people are alike. And so we're looking at all of this advice that people are giving querying agents. And I think the only real piece of advice that we need to give people who are querying is to be professional. Yeah. End of story. Just be professional. And so the part where I say I feel like I owe B an apology is because B wrote a query letter and she put in there about the other finished books that she had. And I was like, take that part out, because I was told to take it out of my query. Like when you query an agent, you query one book. You don't tell them about all the other books or the book that you're writing next or any of these things. Like, you're querying one book, And this particular agent told me the thing that was wrong with my query was I never talked about everything else I had in my back pocket. I never talked about everything else I had done and what I had waiting, and I didn't sell myself. And I was like, that's really interesting. So B, I think you should go back and put in your query letter that you have other stories in the same line, because what this agent told me was, yeah, I might like this story, but you know what I like more than this story is the fact that if I think I can sell this story, you got 5 more in your back pocket, lady. She's like, that means more to me than somebody who has written one book and that's it. And I've got one book and I got to sit and wait for him to write the next one. And I was like, dang, I didn't think about that. So be professional. I think that's it. End of story. And if you feel like it needs to go in your query letter, maybe you should put it in your query letter. Yeah. So
I'm no querying expert, right? I'll be the first to say that. But I can extrapolate your advice to just take all feedback with somewhat of a grain of salt, right? And for example, my dad is one of my beta readers. Always has been, always probably will be, except my horror novels. He doesn't want to read those. But he just gave me feedback on my novella, and it's a dark fantasy. And he said, Doug, there are some scenes in here that are too gruesome. You should tone it down a little bit. To which I'm like, yes, I accept your feedback and it's noted. However, this genre
is your ideal reader.
Yeah, this genre is known for its gruesomeness. He is admittedly not the most ideal dark fantasy reader. He's a fantasy lover, but not a dark fantasy lover, right? It's more that he's my dad and he likes to read it. So I take that feedback with a grain of salt. You're probably going to go and see on social media somebody, saying plotting is the only way that you can write a good book, or pantsing is the only way you can write a good book, right? In direct contradiction to what we just said. You got to take it all with a grain of salt. And even our advice, as much as I believe everything that's been said here today and think that it is incredibly helpful, some of it might not apply to you specifically. Right? You might be an exception to one of these things, or there might be better advice for you. And when you get feedback from beta readers or editors, appreciate their expertise and appreciate the experience that they are bringing to help you. But still understand that your book is your book. And in a lot of situations, you probably do know best, as long as you've done your best to put yourself in that situation.
Well, and we've talked about this before, that there are certain things that you must learn. There are mechanics of writing. There are the ways that the English language operates, that if you want to communicate effectively to other English speakers, you need to operate within these parameters, or at least know the parameters, so that when you choose to break out of that, you understand what you're doing and what the cause and effect will be, and how a person who reads that, understanding the way English language works, when you break that, it has a desired result. all that said, there are certain things that you need to read, need to learn, but then everyone else's experience and their pursuit of their art is completely different. We can tell you what worked for us. We can tell you how things we've observed in the market, and things like that. But at the end of the day, your book is your book, and your expression is your expression, and you can take advice and you can filter what you're doing through that advice, and it may or may not work. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is up to you. And it's all subjective until it bumps up against the part that's not subjective.
All right. Well, that's been our 6 best pieces of advice for new writers. 3 for all new writers, 3 for very specific areas of writing. Before we go, I got 2 things that I want to cover. First, if you haven't already, click that thumbs up below us. Make sure you're subscribed. Bonus points if the notification bell is on, so that you are notified half an hour before a live stream starts and whenever a video goes up. And if you're watching after this, leave a comment with your best piece of writing advice if you've made it this far. Second thing that I want to cover is Hank and Abby, you both have some kind of event coming up this week.
Yes.
Here's your chance to shamelessly plug it. Hank, yours is on Thursday.
It is on Thursday. And Sue Hinksenbergs, I believe is how you pronounce her name, wrote her first book and published it in her 60s. And it's a phenomenal book, and it's so much fun. And I'm going to talk to her about kind of, starting this other career, when your previous pursuits have all kind of run their course, and starting a new chapter in life. And I think it's going to be a really fun conversation.
Excellent. And Abby, before you do yours, I just gotta give those bonus points to Erica for that having the notifications on. All right, Abby.
Gold star. Yeah, so Friday we have Deborah Walls that's coming to do a workshop. As we sit here talking about advice and how to take advice, her workshop is all about how to work with editors. So last week I did a workshop on what is developmental editing. And so if you're not sure, if you've never had one before, make sure that you check out the replay of that. That is live on YouTube. But otherwise, Deborah is going to come with some really concrete tips about how you digest an edit letter and how you figure out what is it the editor is actually trying to say. So it's really good. It's an encore presentation. I've taken the workshop before. I specifically said, please come and do it for Dabble. And she agreed. So join Excellent. Us on Friday.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hank. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this very fun fireside chat. This was a great time. And we will see you all later. Bye for now.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.